You're listening to the School of Connection podcast, episode 8.
Welcome to the School of Connection podcast with Rana Ulk. Each week, she'll connect you with the stories and wisdom of people doing extraordinary work that's changing the world. If you're hungry for growth and love inspiration, you're in the right place. Each episode will give you practical insights and ideas that you can take action on starting today. And now, your host, founder and chief connectologist, Rana Ulk.
Hello, everyone. I want to start out by saying this. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing right now, thank you very much for listening. As much fun as it is for me to inquire and ask questions and to have these conversations with inspiring people doing awesome things, I do just want to let you know that I'm mindful of you out there and I really appreciate you stopping by. I'm in the midst of some cross-country relocation stresses right now, and truthfully, I am feeling overwhelmed more often than I'd like. And you know what? I don't like myself when I'm overwhelmed or stressed. So while I was preparing for this interview today, and I realized my work, because this is my work, it was feeling like a much needed break in my day. I was reminded of how lucky I am to get to do this, but more importantly, of how incredibly important it is to take a moment to pause and allow gratitude in. Not in a lip service sort of way, but in a really emotional and heartfelt way, to really pause and take in what you're grateful for, especially when you're stressed out. And this isn't just woo-woo or spiritual talk here. Gratitude really does completely change your perspective, of course. We all know that. But it can also change your health and your life. And as much as I know that, as much as I've learned that, I still forget sometimes. So I was really happy when I remembered today. And I know that part of why I remembered that was because of the guest that I have. She would definitely second what I have to say. And the level of credibility she has is pretty darn high. She is a medical doctor. And she knows that her patients' healing and wellness is very highly correlated with their attitude, their thoughts, and their feelings. She went out and became a certified coach on top of being a medical doctor so she could help not just doctors, but her patients. She has a personal story and a unique mission that I am really excited for her to share with all of us today. So Penelope Hsu, did I pronounce that correctly?
You did.
Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me on. This is great.
Awesome. So let's start from the obvious. You're a medical doctor and you're a coach. How does that happen? Isn't being a doctor enough?
Oh, yes. It was more than enough. And then the third thing that I throw in there also is that I'm also an actor. So there was a lot of juggling. But basically what had happened was I hit a bit of a rut about 5 years ago. And I couldn't really figure it out. I had a good job and I was, in a decent relationship, and I just felt like there was something missing. I felt stuck. It just didn't feel right. I couldn't figure out why. And I had tried therapy because I'd done that in the past and it didn't really work. I tried church. That didn't really work. I tried journaling like crazy, and that didn't really work. I feel like I'm a smart girl, and I could not figure this out. And I just stumbled upon a woman who was a therapist and also a life coach. And I always laugh, ironically, when I heard that, I was like, well, I just want the therapy. I don't know what a life coach is. That's woo-woo nonsense. Exactly. I'm a science girl. I'm a medical doctor. I don't
need anybody to tell me how to live.
That's right. And she was like, okay, science, we'll do it your way. But if it doesn't work, and from what I had already been through, I kind of already knew that wasn't going to work. Will you be open to trying something new? And I said, sure. At that point, I was just so stuck. I was willing to try anything. And of course, the life coaching worked. It was very profound. It asked, my coach asked me questions that nobody had ever asked, and had me think about things and look at patterns and recognize patterns that I just was not really aware of. There's a level that we live our lives that is conscious, and then there's a whole other level that is unconscious that we're not aware of. And as my awareness grew, I remember becoming very indignant as to like, why didn't I learn this in medical school? Like, this is profound stuff. This changes people's lives. It totally changed mine. Why don't I know anything about this? And why was this not taught? And why are we taught that it is woo-woo, that it is nonsense? There's this,
Well, let's dispel the number one myth right there, because it's becoming more prevalent. You're seeing it a little bit more in sitcoms and whatnot. A life coach, you guys, does not tell you what to do. Let's just put that out there. But go on, Penelope.
So I could not get over the fact that it was just so helpful to me. Mm-hmm. I started using the techniques that my coach used on me on my older teen patients. I'm a pediatrician, but I work with a lot of teenagers in sort of doing sexual health type stuff. Mm. And I saw it work on them. And I was like, okay, well then, this stuff works. Like, this is not woo-woo nonsense. This really works. And if my medical community does not have any sort of way to support that or teach me that, I'm going to go and do it myself. So I went, even though I swore I'd never go back to school after medical school, I found myself like an eager student, taking notes and all this kind of stuff. And I went and I became a certified coach.
So that's, it wasn't enough for you to just learn what you learned, and you got what you needed out of it. What was the inspiration? What made you feel like I've got to become a coach myself rather than just benefit from it?
I feel like there's one patient that I always remember. She was a teenager, and in our clinic at the community health center I work at, we have like 9 docs, and she had seen every single one of us. And every single one of us had documented that we tried to get her on birth control and that she refused. And then lo and behold, she would have gotten pregnant, and then there would be an abortion, and then this whole cycle would start all over again. And I had been one of the docs that she had seen and, had tried. And then after the coaching and the way that, I was taught to sort of ask questions and dig deeper and not just be like, why don't you just take birth control? Why, what's wrong with you? Do you want, instead of that kind of an attitude, I asked her something along the lines of, what could you be doing if you weren't always dealing with this crisis? If you weren't always in crisis mode, what else could you do? And she just looked at me like, I don't know. And I was like, well, let's think about it, and just planting that seed of like, what else is possible here, and what would you like to be doing with your time? What would you like to be doing with your life, rather than just kind of getting stuck again in a rut, boyfriend to boyfriend, relationship to relationship, quite honestly, abortion to abortion. What else could you have? What else would you like in your life? And she cried, and that's always to me a good sign that it's a huge release, there's a breakthrough. And, she's like, well, I certainly wouldn't be sleeping on my friend's couch. I'd go to school. I would do this. I would do that. And I was like, well, why don't we work on that? Why don't we make that the goal? Why don't we see what that looks like? And we just, I just literally started Googling GED programs and this and that. Fast forward a couple months, she finally gets on birth control. Fast forward a couple more months, she moves back home. She goes back to school, and off she was, and off she went. And, I look at her chart, and she had seen so many of us, myself included, and had just hit brick wall after brick wall after brick wall. And then, not to like pat my shoulder too much, but like just asking the question of, what do you want from your life? What would you like to experience? Shifts everything away from, what do I need to do in this moment? And just, it gets you out of that, like, soldier in the battlefield mode versus like general off the battlefield and seeing the whole game plan play out. When you're caught in the middle of a crisis, you sometimes can't see 2 steps forward. But what I find so profound about it is it helps people get that perspective so they can see their lives 2 steps, 5 steps, 10 steps forward. And that's so much more inspiring than just being stuck in whatever crisis you're in or stuck in whatever rut you're in.
Well, and especially you're a medical doctor. So if this were, and it doesn't take long to become a coach, if this were a training that was offered to medical students now, we all want our doctors to care more. I can, you can probably go out on the street and at least, and I'm being very generous here, half the people you talk to would say, my doctor doesn't hear me, doesn't see me, doesn't have time for me, doesn't really care about me. And a lot of people do probably go to medical school because it's the thing to do. It's the definition of quote unquote success, and you can have a comfortable living if you do. But I think doctors do care more than they are allowed to. So what do you think, what could change, and why do you think it is that doctors aren't, do they care? Let me just put it that way. Do doctors really care about us, or are we just another number and another patient?
It's funny, I actually just had this discussion last night. I'm facilitating a class with fourth year medical students, and this was the exact conversation. And I think universally we all care. We would not put ourselves through the misery that is medical school and residency if we did not feel very, very passionately that we wanted to help people and that we do care. I think the problem is a multi-headed problem, right? There's the insurance companies don't pay enough, so then you have to see more patients, and so that cuts down on the time. Everything needs to be electronic, so you're constantly looking at a computer instead of looking at your patient. There's so many aspects to it. And then, I think the other thing that winds up happening throughout medical education is there's just so much knowledge that has to be crammed into your brain in a very short amount of time. Even though 4 years sounds really long, it's not that long to learn everything there is to learn about the body and everything that could possibly go wrong and every medication that could be used to cure it. And so there's just this mad rush of compress all this stuff in and get it all in, and then churn out a physician who's going to be able to then, as soon as they're done, get out there and start taking care of patients. And so it's not really set up for the touchy-feely, take time, just get to know your patient. It's not built in. However, having said that, I was very pleased talking to these medical students last night that at least this particular medical school is trying, and they are slowly building in, modules, as they call them, to sort of teach this more interpersonal care versus straight up didactic medical care, right? Versus, not just writing the prescription and ordering the test, but sitting, really empathizing, really hearing what your patient is telling you, and not just thinking of, okay, well, this is another migraine patient, this is another hypertension patient. Really, no, this is Mr. Smith, who's got 4 kids and and just lost his job, and maybe that's what's causing the hypertension today, and maybe it's not a medication change, maybe he just needs to vent, maybe et cetera, et cetera.
So there is more of a recognition of how our thoughts and feelings are affecting our health and physiology, so to speak.
It's starting
to be.
It's starting, yeah. There was definitely none of that when I went to medical school.
Yeah.
I was very happy to hear that they are starting to learn that. There's a technique called motivational interviewing that is a psychological technique. It started in the addiction world, but it really does, it's as coachy as doctors get. Mm-hmm. It sort of asks the question, what do you think is going on? What would you like to change? What do you feel like you're ready for? What are you not ready for? What are the obstacles you're facing? And so it's a little bit, we're getting there. And my hope really is to help, medical organizations, residents, medical students learn about that connection a little bit more, really, really show the benefit of taking the time and really connecting to your patient, because their emotions and their thoughts and their life circumstance absolutely impacts their health. And that being a doctor who heals does not always come from your pen and a test.
Wow.
Being a doctor who heals really can just be sitting with someone and giving them space and knowing and having them know that they are supported and that they have an ally that's going to help them figure things out. It may take some time. It may not be perfect. It may not come from this one prescription, but I'm here for you, with you. And I think that in and of itself can be therapeutic.
Well, and we need it. We need it so badly. And now something comes to mind, and I'm wondering what you think about it. You've heard of the white coat effect.
Mm-hmm.
So can you describe what that is? If it's because it relates to what you're saying in a way. I'm going to relate it if you don't see it, but the white coat effect.
Well, there's the only white coat effect that I know is white coat hypertension, which is a very specific thing where you see a doctor, your blood pressure goes up.
Interesting. Okay. But then maybe it's called something else, but in medical trials, they always have a control group, and we want to make sure, in other words, that when people are getting well, it's not just because they've seen the doctor. They've seen a doctor, and that has a psychological impact on them that, regardless of whether the doctor does anything, can affect their health. They can improve sometimes, even though they're taking a sugar pill, just from the simple fact of having gone to the doctor, right? Yes. So imagine what would happen if on top of that, the doctor, they actually feel cared for and seen and heard, and somebody says to them, so, tell me about your home life. Could this be what's causing your hypertension or your migraine?
Right.
In talking to people and strangers, which is a whole other project I have the reason this comes to mind is I've realized how desperately sometimes people just aren't being heard or feel like they're not being listened to, or that they have nobody to talk to.
Yep.
So, so if I were to ask you, if your mission is complete, Penelope has completed her mission, she's made the change she wants to make in the world, what would that look like? What would it be?
I often joke, I'm going to revolutionize the practice of medicine,
Yes.
I would have, all of my physicians would be mindful physicians. All of my physicians would be aware, not only of what's going on with them, because that's a whole other thing. We don't give any sort of space for our own feelings, which makes it very difficult to show up for somebody else's. But so all my docs would be mindful, would be aware, would be kind and compassionate, would know that there is value, there's therapeutic value in just what you said, in just sitting, in just being with someone in their pain, in their situation, not having an answer necessarily, but just being their ally. And, if my mission is really complete, insurance companies reimburse for that. They allow for longer visits again. And they value the fact that what we do is not just in the things that we order and the things that we write, but in the relationship that we have. So yes.
It's the woo-woo stuff. Right? You need the woo-woo in there. No,
you need a little woo-woo.
Yeah. It's too bad that those things get a bad rep,
Yeah. I think it's starting to turn, and I was actually just on the phone a little while ago with someone who coaches physicians, and he said very clearly, I do not call it life coaching. Wow. I call it executive coaching. I call it leadership development. You do not call it life coaching.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, that's a good point. Because you say life coach and it's like woo-woo. But if you say leadership development, you say, physician development, you say executive development, it changes it.
Interesting.
We're getting there. But medicine is a big ship. It's going to take a long time for it to turn.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm going to try.
Well, you also, speaking of all the things that a doctor has to think about, and now on top of it, we're saying, please care for your patients, ask them how they are, sit with them, hold their hand. You also deal with physician burnout.
Yeah.
That's one of your passions as well. So tell us a little bit about that, because I think many of us think oh, they have it made. They've gone to medical school. The stress is over. They wanted to do this. They finally have this amazing career. What the hell? What do you mean?
Yeah, it is. It is always amazing to me when people are like, what do you mean physicians burn out? Like, how could you possibly burn out? You help people every day. And it is so easy. One thing that, most people don't really recognize is that, to get to the place that we graduate, we have incurred upwards of $250,000 in debt.
Yeah.
And we have been working roughly 100-hour weeks for years. Wow. That takes a toll, and so, yes, we come out with, a quote, healthy paycheck, but you're not paying off $250,000 debt anytime soon. And I know for myself, when I finally finished all of my training, I was 30, and so your entire 20s are spent training. During that time, other people have gotten married and bought their car and bought their house and had a family, and you come out minus $250,000, already exhausted because you've been.
Nobody's paying you $500,000 right after you get out of med school.
No, even if you go into plastic surgery, no one's paying you that fresh out. So there's that we just start with, right? We start with this huge negative, and then we battle our way back up. And then, like I said before, the way healthcare is delivered in this country is less than ideal. Preventative medicine, stuff like I do, like pediatrics, making sure that the kids don't develop high blood pressure and that they don't develop obesity and they don't develop diabetes. I spend hours of my time counseling on exercise and healthy diet and what changes can we make and and, are you still swimming and this and that. But that doesn't get coded as anything. That doesn't get captured as a procedure. It doesn't get coded as an intervention. And so the way our healthcare system is that kind of the touchy-feely stuff, the asking what you're doing, the asking about the exercise and what's going on in your life doesn't get coded or captured. And so doctors will be like, well, if I'm ever going to pay off this debt, I got to do the stuff that gets coded and captured, right? I got to do the extra procedure. I got to see more patients. Is usually what it comes down to is we'll just cram in more patients. And I've seen visits go from 30 minutes to 20 minutes to 15 minutes. How much can you get from somebody in 15 minutes? I mean, we've been talking for about 20, and there's, right? And how would you get through a whole history of someone's life or what's going on in their life and then what's going on with their medicines and what, it's impossible. And so we get on this hamster wheel of just trying to see more people all of the time and then document perfectly so that the insurance companies will, reimburse you for that particular thing and And if they don't like the way it's typed out, then they'll reject the claim. I mean, it's just endless. And there's all this pressure to see more, do more, work more. And it is unsustainable. You can do it for a while, but I feel like after, I don't know, and everybody's different, in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, at some point you're just exhausted, The
moral of this story is, hey, folks, for those of you listening, doctors are people too. They're human. Sometimes they need you to hold their hand and say, how are you doing today?
Right? Oh, God, I would love that.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Because I'm sure you get plenty of crabby people if you're late I'm going to confess right here. When I go into the doctor's office and I have an appointment and I've been waiting for half an hour and then they pull me into the room and I'm waiting another half hour for the doctor, I'm not the most pleasant all the time. Thankfully, I love my doctor. She's, I've been with her for years, but that just means that I'm nicer when I have to wait than I would be otherwise.
No, and I get it. It's frustrating for both ends. You know what I mean? We don't want to run late. We don't want people to just be waiting in the waiting room. And, that doesn't make us feel good either. You don't even understand the pressure that we feel when we see that happening. You're like, oh my God, I'm falling behind. What do I do? And this is why doctors don't pee during the day. We don't eat, we never eat lunch. We don't have a lunch hour. There are literally days where I'm like, have I gone to the bathroom at all today? Nope. Okay. And you just keep going, because you don't want your patients to wait. And so that's what doctors will do. we will not care about ourselves in service of everybody else, right? So I always make sure my staff goes to lunch, like they all go. I will see my patients. If it means working through my lunch hour, fine. If it means staying an hour late, fine.
Uh-oh.
But what about me? When do I eat? When do I pee? When do I get to exercise? When do I get, to relax? It's not our primary directive. And that's what leads to burnout, right? You do so much for your patients and you do so much for the insurance companies. You kind of get lower and lower on that priority list. And then before you know it, you're exhausted, you're resentful, you're bitter. You don't really feel fulfilled anymore by taking care of your patients. You forgot why you went into this in the first place. And that's like the definition of burnout. It's just emotional disengaging.
Yeah. And I think, doctors are already a bunch that are probably harder on themselves maybe, or at least have high expectations of themselves. And you get used to having high expectations. Now, on top of it, there's something that our listeners don't know unless they've right away gone in and looked you up online based on your name. But you're Asian American, and so you might have had that kind of pressure or feel that pressure of doing well and holding yourself to a high standard more than other people. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Let's talk about your personal story just a little bit before we.
Yeah, I went to medical school because I'm Chinese. I have a.
That's an interesting way of putting it. I went because I'm Chinese. Okay.
Yeah. Like my friend put it this way, in Asian culture, you have three choices. You can either be a doctor, a lawyer, or a disappointment.
Oh gosh.
And I've stolen it from him because it's great and it's true. That's it. Maybe you can throw in business. Maybe you can throw in computers.
But engineer, that's a good one too.
Right.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But that's it. And so that's the messaging that you hear from the time that you're little. And, whether it's right or wrong, that's the culture that you grow up and you wind up believing it. You wind up thinking, yeah, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. And you'll have a good living and I can help people. Yeah, sure. That makes total sense, Mom and Dad. I'm going to go do that. Until you take an acting class in high school and you're like, ooh, this is fun. This is better than calculus. And then you get to college and you're like, oh, this is way more fun than biochemistry. But then what do you do with that? And for me growing up, I never challenged my parents. They'd always given me good advice. Why would I think that they would give me bad advice? I bought into the storyline that, acting and performing could be a hobby. It didn't have to be a profession, right? It can be your outside interest. But you need to build and you need to make the sacrifice that we made of coming to this country worth it. So you better overachieve. You better achieve more than what we could. You better sort of do us proud. And I think that is the experience of a lot of immigrants, not just Asian immigrants. And so I went to medical school, and I loved acting, and I didn't really pick it back up until I was done with all my medical training.
So thankfully, more and more of us are awakening to the fact that trying to create a life based on others' expectations is bound to catch up, right? Sometimes it's a rude awakening. That's certainly how it was for me. So what about you? Did you ever then wake up and think, oh my God, I did these things for the wrong reasons. I didn't do what I really wanted to do. Did you ever have any tinges of regret?
Oh yeah, I definitely had that rude awakening. Mine was very rude because I was working as a resident 100 hours a week.
Oh my gosh.
It's just very rude in general. And then to be doing it and not loving it, I'm watching all my other residents really enjoy the fact that they're like doctors now and we're real doctors and we're taking care of patients. And I'm like, I hate this.
Oh, wow.
I hate this so much. And it took me a while to figure out what it was. And I finally kind of had to acknowledge that it was because I felt dead inside. Like all of the creativity that I yearned for had not really been attended to. And I felt like I was being asked to be, an automaton, like just be a robot and, and just follow orders and not think for yourself and not have any sort of life. What life can you really have when you're working 100-hour weeks? And I realized like that wasn't really fulfilling for me. I was just very depressed, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, wow.
I really did not like what I was doing. And to do it for 100-hour weeks for a year, and the idea of doing it for a lifetime was really when I was like, I need to stop. I can't do this. And so I quit. I quit my residency to go be an actor full time.
Wow.
I was like, I just can't do this anymore. I've tried, for 5 years, right? 4 years of medical school and 1 year of residency. I did everything the way everyone told me that I should, and it just made me more and more miserable. And so I finally was like, okay, well then, you know what? I'm going to try doing it my way for a minute and see what that feels like. And it felt great. It felt really, really good to be able to, just audition and be creative and be on, a theater set or a TV set and, doing all these fun things. But at the same time, there was still a part of me that didn't quite feel fulfilled either. And that was sort of like the final awakening of like, oh, wait, I'm both of these things.
Wow.
I'm not going to be able to choose one or the other. I think I have to figure out a way to be both. And that's going to be challenging. And essentially that's what my entire adult life has is sort of been trying to balance those two out and figure out how to make that work and what does that look like and live that
takes
life.
So much courage. I mean, that's radical. I'm sure there are a lot of people who were in your who were in your boat that just wouldn't have said, okay, after all this work, I quit. We're taught not to do that, I can't imagine, but good for you. That is so awesome. So you get to walk your talk. Like,
yes.
If somebody comes to you and says, oh no, I couldn't possibly change course now, you have the response to that. Yes, you can.
Yeah, you can. And you can come back. You know what I mean? When I quit, I'd never thought I was going to come back. And then I did, but I came back under such different circumstances, right?
Yeah.
On my terms. I was actually, on the phone with a client just before our conversation. And she was asking me about how I did it. And yeah, it's not easy, but I made that choice when I came back that I was not going to be 100% doctor. I was always going to have to be both. And, I told her, I was like, I say that flat out when I go for a job interview. I'm also an actor and I will need flexible hours and I will need to work part-time. And if that doesn't work, then that's okay. And that's just the way I live my life. And does that mean I don't make as much money and I haven't had, quite the career trajectory? That's fine by me because I'm living the life that I want to live. I'm not living anybody else's academic, career climbing life. I'm doing me and I'm having fun.
I love it. So you are still acting, you're coaching, and you're still part-time practicing and working at this mission of doctors becoming more holistic in their approach to their patients' health and not allowing themselves to get burnt out. Like,
right.
Wow.
Like I did.
You are multi-talented. Well, okay. Well, thank you very much, Penelope. I want to, before I ask you my one last question, I want to, just in case, and I know there are listeners out there who want to know more about you or reach you, how would they do that?
Well, I have a website, which is www.guidingclarity.com. And yeah, you can find my bio there. You can find all the different types of coaching I do, which, involve like individual coaching. I work a lot with Asian Americans because that's sort of a niche that I know, and all this medical stuff that I do. working with organizations to bring that wellness message. So that's where you can find me. And the email is penelope@guidingclarity.com. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there as well.
Awesome. Should they be looking for you in any movies?
Not any movies as of right now. I've done mostly theater since I came back to New York.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I was Nurse Ratched once in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Wow.
Yeah, that's some nerves there. It's not easy. Acting is not an easy profession, but it certainly is very satisfying and fulfilling. That's
a great role. You get to be crazy.
Yeah, exactly. I did. Some people would argue that I was just myself, but I can be intimidating. So what's one action? So for our listeners out there who want to, in some way, improve their lives, we've talked about so many different things. And, going back to one thing they could do, I suppose, is hold their doctor's hand and say, how are you? Right? We already talked about that. But one action that could benefit them that they can take away and start today.
Yeah, I teach a one breath meditation. And the way I learned it was called the squeegee breath, which is, the thing that people use when they're washing windows, where one side is all soapy and you put it on all the soap and you can't see anything. And then with the other side, you just kind of squeegee it away and it's all clear. The idea is, we have a lot of stuff going on in our lives and in our minds that gets very cloudy, and you can't sometimes see clearly what the answer is. You can't focus. You can't get present. You can't attend to what you're doing, right? You're so distracted. And so with this one breath, you kind of take it all in on the inhale, and you kind of gather all of the thoughts and the distractions and the stresses and the bills and everything, and you kind of gather it in on the inhale. And on the exhale, you just imagine like that squeegee just kind of clearing everything away. So you take a big breath on the inhale and gather it all, any sort of stresses you have going on at home, moving, finances, and then as you exhale, you just wash it all off and you just kind of clear the plate. And most of the time it works. I would say it works all of the time. It's just one breath, because I know people don't have 20 minutes to meditate or do a deep breathing exercise.
Yeah.
One breath and just kind of wipe away.
I love it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. I think I've said it a lot, but I do adore the work you're doing and all the reasons you're doing it. I can't wait until we're living in a world where your mission has succeeded. And I know it will, because word is getting out. And someday I'm going to see you and be like, oh my gosh, I interviewed her. So that's going to be awesome.
Well, thank you for having me. This is so much fun. And as you can tell, I can talk about this stuff all day. So thank you.
You're welcome. All right, everybody. Well, take care until next time. And, you know what? If you have questions, comments, or you just want to say hello, please hit me up. I'd love to hear from you. And I even have a fun email address for you. It's hellorana@schoolofconnection.com. I'll be waiting. Take care. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the School of Connection podcast. Be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes, and visit schoolofconnection.com/podcast for the show notes.